But yeah, let's go ahead and plow into HasanAbi. Destiny, the sequel. The Storm and Norman coming and crushing this guy. We did the highlight reels of all the most like devastating insults. But yeah, also this is crazy. Like when you see Nick Fuentes and Destiny like in the same room, you're like sitting right next to each other. Did that happen at the beginning? Like that, they're like right next to each other in that. Like that's not my brain.
Yeah, that actually happened.
Imagine the stench. Imagine just the foul odors that emanate from that man's incel ass. Or it's like you can't even wonder what it was. I'm surprised that if I were him, I would be looking like Andy Dufresne wading out of Shawshank trying to talk to this guy, just like constantly like looking over like all foul face, just like vomiting into like a bag.
Anyway, that got quote tweeted by Hasan Piker. He says, shocking that this dude got owned by one of the most well-read academics on the issue of Palestine so hard that his own debate partner started laughing at him. Ooh, and you guys might have noted that Benny guy who was debating alongside Destiny, in fact, was laughing at a few different points when Norm just started, roasting the ever-loving hell out of him.
Yeah, and I guess I haven't watched the whole debate, right? And I did selectively watch, the parts that everybody was like, Norm Finkelstein is just going in on Destiny. But we talk about it. And now I'm convinced that those tweets actually did come from Norm Finkelstein. Do you remember back in the day where we were all like, is he really tweeting from this Twitter account? Like he was just going like balls to the wall, internet rhetoric, like he was on a Reddit chat board. That's how he talks. And it's so hilarious, bro, because you don't see a lot of academics that have that like quiet composure that he has of like, oh no, what I'm saying, like he told us, he was like, I meditate on everything before I come out of here and say it, so I don't have to apologize for anything that I've said because I already know that I'm fucking confident that I believe what's coming out of my mouth. You know what I mean? And so just to match that, delivery and that kind of like style of debate that he has with the just nasty verbal attacks that are normal in the debate me bro culture, I think it is fucking hilarious. So I relate to the guy being like, hey bro, like I principally I might agree with you, but this guy's dragging your ass. Like he got you. It's kind of like we used to talk about how Nick Cruz got just absolutely manhandled by Vosh, just absolutely fucking just destroyed, even though like I think that Nick had a point. He just didn't know how to debate him. You know what I mean? He didn't know like how to make the point of why voting for Joe Biden, like in many states, wasn't going to make a difference. Like he didn't go into the electoral college arguments. He didn't like flesh out like why, it was just went into straight, he's a fascist, whatever. Right. And so Norm Finkelstein being able to just like handle the penultimate, or the people were busting our ass because we said penultimate the wrong. I don't give a fuck. Sorry, haters. Penultimate debate, bro, in Destiny. And like show him like, bro, like you've been exposed as an emperor with no clothes on. I think that it's just, you have to laugh at that, even if you're ideologically like in agreement.
Oh yeah, 100%. It seems like Norm's sense of humor has really resonated with a lot of people on social media, a lot of like Gen Z folks, for instance, which makes 100% sense. He is genuinely hilarious. Like I really think that a lot of people didn't understand how funny Norm Finkelstein actually is, but he's just effortlessly like hilarious pretty regularly, which makes him quite a joy to watch in a debate setting, because he doesn't even have to try. It's just like what he says is just effortlessly hilarious. I think we might have seen this clip the other day, but just in case anyone didn't, let's take a quick look at this minute-long moment.
Mr. Bennell, don't change the subject. If you don't know what you're talking about, at least have the humility. You talk about chapter 6. You don't know chapter 6. How close has 242 gotten to the Palestinian peace? From tweet 5. You have no idea what you're talking about. It's just so embarrassing. At least have some humility. Between us, we've read maybe 10,000 books on the topic, and you've read 2 Wikipedia entries, and you start talking about chapter 6. Do you know what chapter 7 is?
Answer me.
Special intent. Did you read the case?
Yeah.
It is
Mr.
a highly
Farrelly,
special intent.
I'm going to ask you again.
I'm definitely of the opinion that there isn't really any value to trying to reach people like Destiny, who are just going to like stare down at their notes and just start trying to fire off random bullshit until you start talking, and they can start spinning their web again to their audience to, you know, make them seem like the most educated and the most articulate or whatever, trying to be a facts machine regardless of where those facts would take you if you were, you know, just objective. Anyway, it's fucking annoying to listen to, though.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think that's why a lot of people are kind of just posting the funniest parts of this debate, because they know that, you know, Destiny can't really be reasoned with. For the most part, he's stuck in his ideology. And that's why the main takeaway for a lot of people from this 6-hour long freaking debate was just like, LOL, Destiny got owned. Destiny got roasted by this, like, you know, elder intellectual who's just like not having it.
Did you ever watch that Zizek movie, Perverse Guide to Ideology?
No, but you told me it was great. That's the one all about movies, right?
Yeah, he has two. He has a Perverse Guide to Cinema and a Perverse Guide to Ideology. They're both directed by Ray Fiennes' sister, Sophie, or Sophia Fiennes. Anyway, it's interesting stuff. They basically unpack it all through films, and one of the things that he talks about is the scene with Roddy Piper fighting that guy and like forcing him to put on the glasses, and they live, right? And they like have to fight each other over and over, and it's this long, like 7 or 8 minute long sequence. And the whole point that Zizek makes is that this is you know, the director, in this case, John Carpenter, showing us like how difficult it is to penetrate people and force them to look at the world without their glasses of ideology, right? You know, and then he was like, he beats him over the trash can, and he's like, we're all eating from this same trash can of ideology, right? Basically what this reminds me of is Norm Finkelstein just beating, you know, Roddy Piper just beating up this guy, trying to force him to see the world, you know, without his, you know, forced ideology. But it's a lost cause, you know.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, to be honest. And I don't know where to even start on this. Obviously, we're not going to watch the whole thing. There is a video we can at least take in some of Hasan watching and reacting to the entirety of the 6-hour conversation. So I don't know, Zach, do you want to just freaking watch a little bit of this before we move on?
Sounds good.
Larger point here is to basically say that, like, regardless of the prejudice that people have, their cause across the board was not motivated by anti-Semitism, but instead motivated by a completely understandable motivation to not be victims to a settler colonial state.
There was a lot of anti-Semitism in those movements, but then you went on to say, but of course, at bottom, it was about the occupation. It wasn't about, and I've read it.
Yeah, but you're moving from different
I'm not
ages, across the ages.
About your whole book.
The occupation began in 67.
I think this is a fair assessment too, by the way. He's saying, if anti-Semitism played any role whatsoever, why didn't you bring it up in your book?
I looked for evidence of this anti-Semitism as being a chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. I didn't see it.
Did he make that claim? I don't remember the word chief. Yeah, it's one of the elements. Very binary. One of the elements.
Binary.
Yes, binary.
Please don't give me this postmodernism binary. You're the one.
Oh God. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no, Norm, don't do it. So, it's not binary thinking. Why would you bring it up then? I'm sure some Palestinians were also bad guys. I'm sure some Palestinians, like, for example, did murders. I'm sure some Palestinians stole. Would you ever bring that up as an argument, as a justification? No, you only are bringing the anti-Semitism aspect, even though it is nowhere near an important motivator in Palestinian emancipation, to justify your position, to justify the fears, to justify why Israel had to be violent. That's
such a great point. And it's also true on the flip side that you almost never hear people like accusing Zionists or Israeli citizens of Islamophobia as a, you know, base foundation.
Yeah, well, that's because that's just the premise of the foundation of their government, is Islamophobia.
But it's so obvious, but you never hear it pointed out. Like, people never make that argument in the same way that it's so popular to make the argument that anti-Semitism is actually the, you know, sole reason for people's opposition to Zionism. Yeah, no, we don't dislike Zionism. We actually just hate Jews and want an excuse to, you know, be able to say it on the internet. So we just switch out. Like, that's constantly trotted out here as the laziest, dumbest excuse. But people hardly ever grapple with the other side of that, which is that Zionism itself is basically, incredibly Islamophobic.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I think Hasan Piker does so well. He sits there all day and breaks down this video and does a distillation of what would possibly be lost in the kerfuffle of all of that, which is a great point that Norm Finkelstein was making, which was that in the entire book, there was no evidence, that would be basically that was like to substantiate that accusation, but yet it's constantly leveled. And he's like, you wrote this whole book. There should be fucking pages and pages and pages of, explicit examples for why this had to come, because of just the outpouring of anti-Semitism. When in reality, we all know that the most vicious and grueling anti-Semitism of the 20th century, it was all in Europe, guys. It was all in Europe. And what's so crazy, I know I was harping on this in yesterday's stream, so we don't have to talk about this too much, but through all of I've been forcing myself to do a lot more reading because I took a big break from that for a long time. And one of the things that keeps coming up is how intense the United States banking ties were with the Nazi Party, how the financed people in the United States were just at every level still in bed with the Nazis, and then rehabilitated the ones that they could, immediately in the aftermath, right? And now it's so funny because we're like, oh, well, then they established Israel. And it's like, yeah, dude, they established Israel while a bunch of fucking actual anti-Semites, raging fucking just the worst scum of the earth, were in power in this country. And that was the whole big deal. Like, I know Joe Rogan makes people concerned about the Operation Paperclip. That's a real thing. You guys can read about that. Just because he fucking picked that up for 2 weeks and made a big deal out of it. Like, that really happened. We did rehabilitate a bunch of Nazis. So I just think it's really interesting now how you looking back and they're like, we had to do all of this to face anti-Semitism. It's like, dude, these were the most anti-Semitic people possible. They just also happened to be the most Islamophobic people possible. And they wanted the geopolitical asset of Jerusalem and have it be right located in between like Syria and Lebanon and all that shit where they wanted to be. Anyway. So just historically, that entire argument that it was like an effort to like stave off anti-Semitism is like totally wrong. In fact, there were a lot of people that were even Holocaust deniers in U.S. government during the most critical times. And Roosevelt was seen as like fighting Winston Churchill's war, was how a lot of people were describing it, and sending your sons to die for some shit that doesn't impact us and all kinds of stuff.
That, in my opinion, is basically that gives a revelation to the listener, to the careful listener. Okay, the revelation is, yes, Israel's actions are unjustifiable, but because if Israel's actions were totally justifiable on its face, you wouldn't have to grasp at like random nonsensical bigotries that you think are motivators that you didn't really think were primary motivators at all. This is reactionary thinking in display. For those of you who don't understand, this basically goes back to, old colonialist justifications of civilizing the barbarians. It happened in the Roman times, and it happened during the conquistadors in their conquests, and it happened in Manifest Destiny. It is always the same exact. They're barbarian, they're violent, and they want to kill us, and that's why we have to civilize them.
What I said, the chief motor. Do you have your page 137?
You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick question. What do you think the ideal solution was on the Arab side from 47? What would they have preferred? And what would happen if, and then the second one, what would have happened if Jews would have lost the war in 48? What do you think would have happened to the Israeli population?
I think the Palestinians and the Arabs were explicit that they wanted a unitary, I think, federal state, and they made their submissions to UNSCOP. They made their appeals at the UN General Assembly.
What do you mean by unity?
It always goes back to the they weren't perfect victims narrative, by the way. Notice, they were not perfect victims. The Palestinians were not perfect victims. This victim of police brutality is not a perfect victim. You only bring up George Floyd's track record if you want to justify why he was executed. Okay, you don't just bring that up randomly in a situation.
Bro, that is another just chef's kiss impeccable point from Hasan, right? The idea that they weren't the perfect victim, the idea that, oh well, why didn't they pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Why did this one bad guy do this one bad thing? Oh, see, this is why we had to, do apartheid in South Africa, because I don't know if you know this, there was some anti-white sentiment that was growing in the slums we forced everybody else to live in. It's like, no, you don't say. They didn't like you after you oppressed them for hundreds of years. I can't imagine where any of that animosity came from. It's ridiculous.